Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to the 22nd Jacques Pollack Annual Research Conference. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this virtual gathering focused on how to secure an inclusive and resilient recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. It has been almost 2 years since the outbreak of COVID-19. While many of us were hoping at the beginning of this year that both the health crisis and the economic consequences of it would be behind us by now, we have come to realize that the economic fallout of the pandemic is much stronger and longer lasting than we had expected. I will highlight 3 key problems: vaccine inequalities, scarring, and inflation. Let me start from vaccines. The uneven distribution of vaccines across advanced economies and developing countries, combined with significant differences in policy space to respond to the economic crisis, have resulted in a dangerous divergence in the global economic recovery. Let me give you statistics that tells the story well. In advanced economies, over 60% of the population has been fully vaccinated. By contrast, the share of fully vaccinated people is about 5% in Africa and much less in the poorest countries. The inequality in front of us has human consequences, but it also has economic consequences. It impacts the speed of the economic recovery. According to our last World Economic Outlook forecast, while real per capita GDP has already come back to pre-pandemic levels in some advanced economies and will reach that level in the next quarters in many others, in most developing countries, it will take years before the same is achieved. Let me go to the second problem, economic scarring. The disruptions caused by the pandemic have resulted in serious long-term economic damage. The labor market fallout continues to impact the extent and inequality of the recovery, with young and low-skilled workers particularly hard hit. And what is most worrisome is the decline in female labor participation, a scarring that will take many years to heal. Third, inflation. The dislocation of supply chains, limited transportation capacity, and higher commodity prices have led to a resurgence of inflationary pressures across the globe not seen since the 70s. If persistent, these supply shocks may require central banks to withdraw monetary accommodation at a time when the world economy has not yet fully recovered. Against this unsettled background, we have assembled a fantastic set of panelists, presenters, discussants for this conference. Our membership relies on your analytical excellence and expertise to guide them in their policy decisions. The questions before our members today are particularly challenging. During the annual meetings last month, we identified 5 important issues that require immediate attention. First and foremost, how do we ensure a stronger, more resilient and inclusive recovery going forward? The recovery should not just be limited to advanced economies, with most emerging markets and developing countries trailing behind. The recovery should be the outcome of a multilateral effort lifting all economies out of the crisis at the same time. Key for this is vaccination. It requires strong multilateral coordination and a renewed effort by advanced economies to fulfill their commitment to provide sufficient vaccines through COVAX to get at least 40% of each country's population vaccinated by end 2021 and 70% by mid-2022. Reaching these targets will produce a stronger and more inclusive global recovery. Second, what is the appropriate monetary policy response to the rising inflationary pressures? Central bank governors around the world are struggling to understand whether price increases associated with the dislocation of supply chains and the mismatch between supply and demand in key sectors are persistent or not. They need your analytical insight to point to the appropriate monetary policy response to support a continued strong recovery while avoiding a de-anchoring of inflation expectations going forward. Third, when is the right time to withdraw the significant fiscal stimulus provided during the pandemic? Fiscal policy has played a critical role across the world to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on households and firms over the last nearly 2 years. However, this has come at the cost of rising public debt burdens. The recent experience of several emerging markets in debt distress underscores the importance of maintaining policy credibility. At this juncture, every finance minister is seeking to fine-tune fiscal policy to ensure the appropriate support to the economy while preserving a credible fiscal framework and a sustainable debt profile over the medium term. Again, your advice in this area would be invaluable. Fourth, what structural policies can mitigate the fallout on young and low-skilled workers and the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women? According to the ILO, 54 million women around the world lost their jobs last year. This is 1.5 times more than men. This inequality calls for action to reverse this trend and ensure that women are given the same opportunities to contribute to the global economy. Your recommendations on policies to support families, and particularly women with young children, could go a long way to even out job opportunities across age and across gender. And finally, we should not forget the most daunting challenge of our time. How do we make sure that coming out of this pandemic, we plant the seeds to save our planet? Fast-rising global temperatures compel us to act now to reduce carbon emissions. We need to have ambitious national plans to reach carbon neutrality and implement carbon price floors appropriately tailored to countries' income levels. And in this context, I'm encouraged by the discussions at the ongoing UN COP26 climate change conference. There is a strong global willingness to move forward toward addressing climate change. The fund is ready to help implement ambitious policies to save the planet. And I'm confident that this conference will be able to provide the analytical elements to our membership to respond to these challenges. I look forward to hearing from all participants and wish you all the best in your discussions over the next 2 days. Thank you.